almost unanimity among the opposition MPs that the July 1 deadline should be moved to September 1. Then you have Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav asking, what does the GST do for the rural population? You have one MP from Andhra who said, I think Mr. Rao, aerated drinks is a drinks of common man. So why a higher rate for the aerated drinks? You had Supriya Sule, Mr. Sharad Pawar's daughter, a Lok Sabha MP from Baramati. She made a couple of very interesting points. She expressed concern over data privacy. How is so much data going to be protected? She also made another important comment. What is the plan B in case of drought and other calamities? She also made a point which everyone has been talking about. 36 registrations is not going to be seamless. It will be a TDS, and more automation could lead to job losses. You also had Dr. Moily saying that you need sufficient time to build up the structures, that this is a baby step. Mr. Matab went ahead and said that there are fewer taxes, no cascading impact, free interstate trade, comprehensive zero rating, but do not expect too much from GST. It all depends on the revenue neutral rate. Shiv Sena MP Mr. Adsul said, you need research for reducing burden on the consumer, and you quoted Mr. Reddy. And Shireen, I'm so happy that you got the pronunciation right. Ugudi Pachudi, we call it Pachudi in South India.
I was afraid I'd muck that up, Arun.
In South. Not at all. You drove it out of the park. It is Pachdi. And in what context? Yeah, absolutely. And in what context Mr. Reddy said that? He said that, a Pachdi is supposed to be sweet, sour, and bitter. And we will know only after GST implementation whether it is sweet or bitter. But on a serious note, Shireen, one important point here, I think the larger theme, we've all been looking at GST as an economic debate over the last month or two, and we forgot the political fallout. For the first time now, you are seeing what happened in Australia and Malaysia. The political statements are now coming in. The opposition is saying that we are standing for the common man. We are going to watch out if GST really delivers the goods for the common man. In many ways today was not an economic debate, was a political debate. People preparing the pitch for what lies ahead. Very, very interesting, because if you look at the experiences of Malaysia and Australia, you had incumbent governments even lose elections after the GST in some of the countries where it was implemented. So the concern from the opposition MPs is all coming from a common man point of view, trying to drive home the point that GST must deliver goods for the common man. This is a very interesting political economic debate, because for one simple reason, Shireen, that the government has really sold GST as this big consequential indirect tax reform, once in a generation sort of tax reform, and therefore the expectations are sky high. I think it's very important that the government probably does a little bit of the expectation management.
Well, that is absolutely right. But Arun, as you mentioned, that this is, of course, what we've seen in Parliament today is largely about politics. But there were several valid economic issues that were raised as well. So let me bring in our panel of experts, and let me go across to Prateek to start with. Prateek, because this is an issue I know that you have mentioned and raised in the past as a concern. And today we saw the Congress leader Veerappa Moily talking about that, the anti-profiteering clause, and saying that in a free market environment, how is an anti-profiteering clause going to work? Of course, we will have to wait to see how the finance minister responds and replies to that, but this is a legitimate concern.
No, yes, it is. I mean, I think there are two parts to it. One is how will it be administered, and the second, which more important, is that where do you have time to administer it? Because if you're talking about 1st of July as an implementation date, and the rate of tax will only be known by, let's say, end of May or June, you just don't have time to for the businesses to react and change the pricing from 1st of July. And also there is no transition period which has been prescribed for anti-profiteering. So anti-profiteering should only be, if at all you apply it, it should be only for 3 to 6 months. Right? In Australia it was for 3 months, for example. Now, if you don't have a transition period, do you just want this clause to be there forever, right? So I just do hope that it will remain an enabling clause as of now, and then government will watch it for a couple of months when GST starts, and then try and notify if the concerns about the price rises really comes to be true. Because the way it is notified right now, implementation would be a huge challenge, and if you look at Malaysian experience, more than 10,000 companies were proceeded against That's a real fear that the industry has, and because we don't have enough time, I think this clause should not be made effective, at least to start with.
Okay, let me bring in Money as well. Money, one of the other concerns that was raised, and specifically raised by Kalyan Banerjee of the Trinamool Congress, saying that it will not be easy to roll out the GST as per its current July 1 timeline. He believes the government should consider deferring its launch to the 1st of September. July 1 is not an ending in itself. And I know, Money, that you've been raising this issue as well, but do you believe that we are going to see any change from that July 1 deadline, at least as of now?
I really think we should be seeing a change as far as the deadline is concerned. And as I had mentioned a few days back, I think the sooner we are clear in terms of the implementation date of 1st September, the better it will be for everybody. Let me just list down the steps that are required to be taken from now so that we are clear in terms of why we are talking of 1st of September. The legislation needs to be obviously approved by the Parliament. The debate has just started now. We are on 29th of March. Parliament session ends possibly 10 days from now, so we don't have too much of time there. The GST Council, in order to discuss the rules, is meeting day after tomorrow, which is 31st. Once they are done with that, then the rules will possibly come into the public domain. The rates are not yet decided, and the rates have yet to be decided. And in between all of these, we also now have a new dimension, because now we have 10 different teams which the government has formed at the end of last week, which are the industry-focused teams which are going to hear the issues presented by each industry. This set of people is expected to submit their recommendations by 10th of April. And those recommendations also then need to be incorporated into the GST Act, into the GST rules. Now, if we are still talking of 1st of July, I think there is too much on the plate for the government. There are far too many things that business is expected to achieve. The outreach program of the government is also starting only in the first week of April. And in a diverse country like India, we are not talking of the big cities only which are going to be affected by GST. We are talking of something like 200 small towns which are going to be intricately affected by GST. Now, doing all of this in the next 3 months, I would say, is really a Herculean task. And consequently, if we have a date of 1st of September, to me, that seems to be far more realistic, both for the government to roll out and both for businesses to start preparing from now.
Okay, so you're saying that the government should look at a 1st of September rollout. In fact, let's just listen in to Kalyan Banerjee, who made that plea in Parliament that the timeline be changed from the 1st of July to the 1st of September. And let's also listen in to Congress leader Veerappa Moily making a pitch for the government to come out and clarify on the anti-profiteering clause.
Please do not rush. Bring it. You are having a time. 1st July is not the ending. 1st September is also there. Up to 1st September you can get the time. Therefore you are having time now. And the arenas which have been discussed, still the lacunas are there, errors are there, which may not be, which is difficult for implementation. These arenas should be covered.
Ultimately, there are a number of people who can be put inside the jail for no reason. Somebody must have paid excess. Somebody would not have, because of the ignorance of law, they could not abide by that. And GST's anti-profiteering penal provision is far too vague and draconian.
Well, those are some of the concerns raised by MPs in the Lok Sabha today. Let me go across to Rohan Shah. Rohan Shah, as Arun was pointing out, and it was Mr. Vishweshwar Reddy who said that the GST is a little bit, and I got the pronunciation wrong, right according to Arun, a little bit like Ugadi Pachadi, a chutney that's served during the Ugadi period, which marks the beginning of a new year. It's a little sweet, sour and bitter, just like the Ugadi Pachadi. Rohan Shah, is that what you anticipated to be?
No, I don't completely understand the colloquial concept, but my sense is that, GST is something that we're all talking about as the tax for the future. And from that perspective, it's not seasonal, it's not anecdotal. It's something that is effectively there to stay. And I think picking up on, some of the debate which is around, I think it's important, given the significance of this and given that we're looking at this as the tax for the future, that even if it takes another 3 months or we shift to the 1st of September, it's important that we get all of the mechanics right, And the debate that one sees, there's concern about anti-profiteering and there's some concern about the penal laws. And I think both of these are unclear. Until they are not made clear, there will be concern. There is a lot of concern on a series of provisions. And, since we last spoke 2 days ago, a lot of issues have come up in terms of the Kashmir taxation scenario, on the drawback scenario, on some penal provisions on seizure and arrest. And I therefore think that, certainly while we can sort of celebrate this as being festive if it's the sign of the future, but there is still a lot where understanding on the ground and even with experts is still to completely formulate, and important that all of the detailing is done well enough. And last time we also mentioned those 7 industry-specific sector, the subcommittees. Those are important ones. We need to see what comes through there. So I think we're seeing in Parliament, in a way, a resonance of the voice we're seeing in trade, which is that this is wonderful, but a little more articulation, a little more detail, and a little more time, all of that is needed.
Rohan Shah, you mentioned that since we last spoke, which was about 48 hours ago, you have been able to identify some more concerns. I remember when we last spoke, you had spoken about the works contract definition being changed and how that could prove to be a cause for concern. You want to take us through some of the other fine print that you've been able to go over and what could be legitimate concerns?
Yeah, so, in the context of the works contract, the concept now is a composite supply, and in the context of the composite supply, the issue then is it the goods or the services which is really the predominant supply? Because that will determine the rate of taxation. The services will be taxed at 18, and the goods, depending upon the basket in which they are, the predominant goods, they will be classified there. So what we're seeing is, this concern in terms of how predominance is effectively going to get looked at. And when we talk of this composite supply, ultimately it is going to get left to the discretion of some officer to effectively decide the test of predominance, especially in cases where, the supply of goods and services in value terms are quite close to each other. And then, there are other considerations also. So that has been, clearly one concern, because works contract, since we got the concept, has always been litigious. And because it tries to sort of harness 2 concepts, one, the trade in goods, and second, the rendition of service, it has always been litigious, and I think this was a time for us to get it right. But right now there are, some concerns in terms of that. Other than that, duty drawback, which was another issue last time we discussed, the way in which the provision is, and it's an important support provision for the purposes of exports. Now, the way in which the provision is, and unless one is missing something major, it seems to be only a provision in the context of goods. So therefore, whether you import or domestically procure goods, which are ultimately used in the export of goods, you will get a drawback. The question is what happens then in the context of services? And, where is it that we are going to sort of look at that provision in the context of services? So since we sort of spoke, several issues have come up. The third I might mention is Jammu and Kashmir. Some people have asked what happens once GST is introduced, under what provision of law do you effectively bring the taxes there? Those taxes now result in transactions with non-registered entities. What will we do? I guess the constitutional question is probably answered under Article 378. Something can be formulated. But, some of the other issues still remain. So I think in 48 hours, as people have looked at the law, the euphoria has settled, of our having gone through a truly historic event. Some of the detailing is coming back with more questions. And that certainly needs to be dealt with in the next few weeks.
Hari, I know that, as part of your team going over the fine print, you've also identified the issue that Rohan Shah brought up, and we had discussed this as well, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and how that could, in fact, be a significant cause of concern for industry. How are you seeing that, and what do you believe requires to be clarified by the government?
No, Jammu and Kashmir is an issue because there are many companies who have operations there or would have transactions there. But what I recently read, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, there was a PTI report which mentioned that yes, the Article 370 is a constitutional potential remedy. But what I read that was that it is possible that once the bills are passed in the Parliament, the J&K Assembly has to accept the applicability of these bills and then can again approve that, and then the GST bills can get amended before the J&K Assembly again passes the SGST law. So it appeared that news to say that it is still possible that J&K can introduce GST, but may have to go through two hoops. One, the Assembly has to approve the applicability, and then you go back and make those amendments in the GST bills and then try and come and pass the GST law like any other state is concerned. So because I was always under the impression, you've seen in all the discussions of the GST Council, the Finance Minister of J&K, Mr. Hasib Drabu, has been a participant in every committee meeting and has been very openly speaking about the issues on GST. So I'm a little surprised. Is this something which is a kind of a process that they'll have to go through, or have they taken a call that GST will not apply in J&K? So I really don't know what that scenario is. But yes, having said that, if J&K remains outside, then what happens to supplies from J&K? Will they be treated like an unregistered GST person? And then what happens to treatment of taxes? So that's an issue that I still believe, I don't think the jury is out. I'm not sure if this is a final decision that J&K will be out, or it's a process that they will go through and J&K will decide to also approve or rather have GST. That's something which is not clear. On the coming back to the anti-profiteering sharing, and I'm happy that this has been brought up at the Parliament level also, because in a free market, I don't think anti-profiteering has a place. Because the moment you bring in provisions like anti-profiteering, then you will have to prescribe many things transparently at the outside. Malaysia had a 3-month prior to GST period and a 12-month into GST period, a 15-month provision where the price net margin methodology was being monitored. In India, we have nothing of that nature. There is only an enabling provision. And if you are not going to provide clarity on that, how is industry going to react? And in a free market economy, let the competitive pricing take over. I don't think this whole anti-profiteering profession, I mean, it might be laudable from a point of view of maintaining or keeping inflation at bay, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think in any competitive world, especially like India, anybody is not going to pass on the pricing. So that's again a concern which continues to remain in the industry.
Yeah, that continues to be a concern. I understand that the Finance Minister is now back in the Lok Sabha, so he perhaps could start his reply on the GST in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But let me go across to Rashmi Deshpande. Now, Rashmi, you've just heard our panel articulate some of the key concerns that they hope the government will address. Some have, of course, been raised in the Lok Sabha today. You want to add to that list of the key clarifications that you would require?
Actually, first of all, through your channel, I would like to congratulate the government, because the thing is that government is sort of bulldozing the GST on almost all the fronts, be it coming up with the relevant procedure or be it introducing it in the Parliament as soon as possible. They have done a very good job, and I do agree with the panel that there are a lot of points which are required to be clarified at this stage, and I have seen some of the debates. And I would suggest that many of the debates are very healthy, where the Parliament and sort of the nation has come to agree that the GST is going to be there. But of course, there are going to be certain issues. What I want to say is that these issues, once the GST is implemented, are going to be teething problems. There are going to be a lot of issues, but let's hope that the government is actually going to act towards sorting it out. But at this stage, I think we should provide our full support to the government and probably to the industry also, because the introduction of the bill and implementation is very, very important. And I would say that maybe not 1st of September, but probably maybe July or maybe August is something which I feel should be the right time, because 1st of September would probably be cutting it too thin for, coming to the 15th September deadline. That is what I think at this moment.
Okay. Okay, Sachin, let me come across to you now, because, one of the critical issues that we've been, of course, talking about is the readiness for a July 1 rollout. But as the Finance Minister today in Parliament clarified that the rules are ready, they will be taken up by the GST Council on the 31st of March, and the rate fitment exercise will begin post that meeting, so it will start in the month of April. There was a lot of hope when we last spoke around these groups that have been set up to look at industry-specific issues and how those could be addressed by way of recommendations recommendations that will be taken up then by the level of the GST Council. But if one goes by what the government seems to say, then the rules are pretty much a done deal. Are you concerned that then the requisite feedback that we were hoping will be taken forward may not necessarily find space?
Well, I think this was a concern. Most of the people were baffled by the new decision of the government to set up the working groups at this stage, because the bill is already tabled in the parliament and rules are supposed to have been ready. So what is this working group going to do? This was a question which was asked from different quarters. So if you look at the run-up to the introduction of GST, now the GST bill will get passed in next 5 to 10 days time, and then the state GST bills will be passed in the sessions of the assemblies in various states, and then the rules, etc. The part of the rules are already out with respect to invoicing, returns, refunds, etc. And there are various issues to be addressed through the rules which is to be framed. So unless and until the working group is understanding the concerns of the industry, and they are also encouraging people to get back to them and voice their concern, and that has to find a place in the rules or subsequent notification or whatever which is required for the purpose of smooth implementation of GST. That perhaps giving little time, very little time for government to act. So having said that, I don't know whether this working groups or the committee, subcommittees are a kind of a public relation effort, because if you see in the past, there are nearly about 50,000 representation received from different industries on the first draft which is released. And when you see the third draft, we know that majority of those representations have been ignored, because it was not seeing any place in this revised draft. And therefore, I think government should concentrate on the other things to see that how you can rather simplify the process of implementation of GST, including the anti-profiteering provision. And again, anti-profiteering is limited to the benefit accruing to the seller on account of any reduction in the tax or any increase in input credits. How do you differentiate between any other, due to increased efficiency in the industry, like, you are streamlining the supply chain, etc. How can one come to a conclusion that this change in the price is only due to the tax, change in the tax incidence? So to my knowledge, I think this could be an enabling provision, as one of the speakers said in the earlier courts. This could be used in cases where if there is any cartelization happen in industry, who all of them are getting together and say that we will not reduce the price, or cases where it's obvious that people are using this as a ploy to increase their profit. Wherever the market competition is fair, the prices are decided by the competition in the marketplace. I hope that this provision should not apply, so that people will not have a kind of concern as any officer can walk into your office and ask for proof. So this is a definite concern. Having said that, I think no GST will ever be perfect. Whatever precaution you take, it can never be perfect.